Alright, good morning everyone. Thank you for your patience as we were having some technological difficulties. That would be what happens when you have over 200 pictures to show you guys. Yes. So I'm going to start right away. This is me in 2012. And I have absolutely no idea that my life is about to change forever. As far as I know, I'm on a one-year trip in Southeast Asia to find out everything about my favorite fruit, the durian. I'm very excited at this point. I started a blog. My blog was called Year of the Durian, and I called it that because it's supposed to be a one-year adventure. 1 year, my year of the durian. So I started this blog, and when the end of the year came, I didn't go back. I was supposed to go back, get a real job, go back to college, do something with my life. But instead, I went to Thailand and I bought the most expensive durian in the world. That's a great choice, right? Yes. So this is a durian from Nonthaburi, Thailand. You've probably heard of it. They have auctions every year. This durian can cost up to 40,000 US dollars, about the same as a car. Mine only costs $300 because I'm a budget traveler. So this was for the blog because I wanted to get everything about durian, everything, and I was willing to go all the way. It ended up that I wrote a book. So my first book was called The Durian Tourist Guide to Thailand. It was for foreigners like me who were lost and looking for the best quality durian they could find. And then a lot of people started finding me, and they asked if they could travel with me. They said, "Oh, your adventures look so great. The durians you post online look so great. Can you please come?" So I said, "Sure, why not?" So we went on a trip. And then more people asked to travel with me. So then, before I knew it, I had a durian tour tasting company. So that's what happened there. And then my future husband and business partner came on a durian tour. That's Richard. And he's really into cameras and video equipment, so then we started going more into YouTube, more into Instagram, making a lot more video content. You can see him over there with the camera. I wrote another book. This book is about Penang, Malaysia. It's an in-depth dive to the history, the culture, different kinds of durians, helping you get the right identifications. And then we started durian tours in a box. So this is a durian tasting sampler box. So if you're not able to travel outside of the United States or Canada, you can still get a taste of what a durian tour would be like. And this ended up being very, very good because we started this right before the pandemic. So we were able to continue our durian tourism activities despite no one being able to travel. So today we have maps of durian farms and durian places that you can visit all throughout Southeast Asia. And I have more than 400 articles about durian on my website. So this is a way that you can explore the world through the internet. And what I found is that durian is an absolutely amazing way to experience the world. There are so many cultures and beautiful places to see. And it's taken me all around the world to places I didn't even know about. So we've been to Zanzibar for durian. I've been to Vietnam for durian. Of course, here in the Philippines. You have to come to the Philippines. Been to Thailand, of course. Hawaii has durians. Sarawak, Malaysia is a wonderful place to go durian hunting. Costa Rica is starting their durian industry over there, just starting. Well, kind of starting. They've had durian for over 100 years, but they didn't know what it was. So they're just rediscovering durian. And today I'm going to be sharing with you, from my perspective of a durian tourist, different cultures around the world and how durian is different. Because durian tourism is a type of community-based tourism. When we do tours, we rely on a lot of people. A lot of people to help us show us their farms, to teach us how to cook, to teach us about all the different plants. It's an amazing way to connect people, to give people an excuse to have something to talk about together. It's a great way to experience a new culture, to really be able to participate and get a new perspective. This is at my friend's wedding in Thailand. And of course, we had her favorite variety of durian. And it really creates a sense of place. And I think this is one of the most important things with durian, is that it is a very, very diverse fruit. And by exploring it, you can get a really interesting sense of the world. Because durian is different. in different parts of the world. There are so many durians out there. It is far more diverse than any other fruit that I know about. How it's harvested is different. It depends a lot on where you are, what kind of flavors you're going for, what the dynamics of the environment are like. The terroir, this is something we talk about in wine. It means the soil, the climate, the rain patterns, all of that affects the durian flavor, and it affects what kinds of durians you can grow in specific areas. What other fruits grow around durian? This creates part of the culture. When you visit a farm, what else do you find there? So this is a wild fruit called a Willowbea elmerii. What it's eaten with is different. So different parts of the world have different traditions and different cultures around how do you eat durian? What time of day do you eat durian? Do you eat it for breakfast? Do you eat it for merienda? Do you eat it after dinner as a late night guilty snack? Right? All these different cultural aspects of how and when and with what you eat durian. How do you prepare your durian? So some people in different parts of the world really include durian in their recipes and their cuisine. This would be durian somtam in Thailand, which we'll talk about again later. The diversity of durian cultures around the world is what allows us to do durian tourism. Because if everywhere was the same, there would be no point in traveling. I would have no customers. You can get the same kind of durian in your own country. Why bother travel? I didn't know any of this when I first arrived. All I knew was that I had tasted durian, and I knew it was good, and I wanted to know more. And I was very obsessed with the idea of seeing what a durian tree looks like. Because where I was from, this is what durian looks like. It comes in a yellow bag. They smell kind of funny. They smell like freezer burn. Fish, they're usually chucked in the same freezer as a bunch of fish. So the smell's really weird. And there's no story about them, it's a bunch of characters on there, you can't read it, you don't know where it comes from, a lot of times they don't declare on the packaging which country it comes from, so it just sort of shows up in the Asian food grocery store with no connection to anywhere. And I found this fruit and I saw that it was huge, much bigger than an apple, much more dangerous than an apple, and I really wanted to know what would a durian tree look like. So, that is why I flew all the way to Indonesia, and I showed up in a small town called City Kelang in the hillsides of Indonesia, where people were so confused about why I was in their town that they sent the local English teacher to my hotel to ask if I was lost. And that is how I met First Steph. And First became one of my first friends in Southeast Asia. And she was the one who ended up taking me the next day on the back of her motorbike out to see my first durian farm. So these were the first durians I ever saw in real life hanging on the tree. And remember, for me, I had traveled across the globe on an airplane to a place where I didn't speak the language, I didn't know anybody. I was totally overwhelmed by the traffic, right? And there they were, I found my holy grail. So this was a very special moment for me. It was also special because it was my first time in a durian farm environment, my first time meeting a durian farmer. So this was my first durian farmer that I interviewed. He was very excited to show me his new gun. He had just bought it 2 days previously. And it was my first time understanding that durians are so valuable that people will go into the farms and steal all of them. He also had a lot of cacao trees under the durians. It was also my first time really seeing like an intercrop, right? So he had cacao and he had durians. And this was a very, very cool experience for me. So I had to go and learn how to eat durian, right? I only had the frozen ones in the bag. You have no choices whatsoever. So this is my first place to go to eat durian. And this is like a restaurant in Indonesia, right? This is the origins of ucoks. So now if you go to Medan, ucoks is this very fancy durian restaurant. Has anybody been there? Anybody been to ucoks in Malaysia and Indonesia? Okay, I've seen it on Facebook, but I haven't been back yet. But now it looks very fancy. But then it was just a bunch of durians in the parking lot. And they had like places to sit and tables, and I was like, wow, it's like an actual durian restaurant. And so that's where I learned that there's an actual etiquette to eating durian. There's different rules about how to choose your durian, what the server is supposed to help you with, So in Indonesia, before you buy the durian, you have the right to taste it. So the durian server will take a little piece up from the durian, he'll nick it with his knife, you can taste that, and you can tell him yes or no. And this was very important for me, because before this, I was just buying all the durians and getting all the rotten ones. So it was a very important lesson for me that I had the power to reject durians that I didn't want. I also learned about kampong durians, right? The ones from the seeds that you can't predict what they'll be like inside. But in Indonesia, you can choose if you want yellow ones or if you want white ones. So this is what you would tell them. You would show up to the durian restaurant and be like, I want a yellow durian, and they would bring it to you. So this was also a very empowering move because now I had choices. I also learned relatively quickly that names are not necessarily names, and you can pay a lot of money for things that are just random compounds. So none of these are montong. None of them. Yep. Also, none of these are petrok. So petrok is a term in Indonesia that I've decided just means more expensive. That's it. So if somebody wants to sell you a durian that's more expensive, they'll tell you that it's petrok super. But none of these are petrok. So petrok is an old variety from the 1980s. As far as I know, there's only maybe 10 trees in existence now. They've been lost. So Indonesia had a bunch of varieties, but the majority of them were either in government stations and were not distributed well, or the education was not distributed well. So for that, people have the names, but not the actual clones. So a very confusing place to be in Indonesia. So the names have mostly been lost, and if they have names, it's usually for one particularly good tree on the farm, and the rest of them are just compounds. But they have really, really special stuff. I mean, this is the Durian Pelangi. So this is one of the red and orange, and it's absolutely beautiful. I don't know why this hasn't been grafted and distributed. Same for this one. This is another Durian Pelangi from East Java. We have so many amazing durians over there. There's another rainbow durian. So has anybody heard of the term rainbow durian? Durian Pelangi? There is a graft floating around. That's one specific. But in Indonesia, it's actually a category. So there's a bunch of rainbow durians. So it's also something to be aware of if you pay a bunch of money for a seedling rainbow durian. You don't really know what you can get. They also have the durian lai. This is also special in Indonesia. This is a hybrid of the Durio crudagensis and the Durio zibethinus. And you find this primarily in Kalimantan or also in Java. And I saw a lot of this in Java. But again, there's no real established varieties. And from our experience, they range from extremely, extremely good, with sort of an orangey red hue and sort of a cherry delicious flavor, to kind of lame. So it would be really nice if somebody wanted to improve the variety or find the really good one and give it a name. They have a lot of this bawor or chani. So chani was introduced from Indonesia, from Thailand a long, long time ago. They call it bawor or kani, and they prefer it tree ripe. And this one also varies a lot in terms of quality. And then they have their own, right? So nowadays, there's sort of a movement in the younger generation to find the local durians. And this is an extremely good one called nenek from Jepara. It's one old tree. This one tastes like honey. It's incredibly good durian, but today, there's still only one tree. And this is nenek, means grandma, and that is her house, and that is her tree. So someday you may hear of a nenek durian from Indonesia and you may be able to buy this. But for now, this is the tree. And the important thing about this is that in Indonesia, primarily, people still live on their farms. Their farm is their home, right? So the farm, the tree here is in her backyard. And so everything that's around that is considered their home. So people there plant for sustainability. They plant to feed themselves and they plant to sell things at the market. So one of the things we mostly saw planted in Indonesia was coffee. Lots of coffee, lots of Robusta and Arabica coffee as sort of an undershadow for the durian. So you have your durians up top, your coffee's below. We saw tons of chili peppers, because I guess those have recently become expensive. Are chili peppers still expensive? Nobody knows? Okay, but in Indonesia, everyone was complaining, oh, chili peppers, too expensive, so they're all planting it. We saw lots of cardamom. again, under the coffees. So they were sort of layering their farms with different crops. You had your durians on the top, your coffees in the middle. Some people had cacao, and then there was chilies or cardamoms on the bottom. And the cool thing about this is when you were walking around the farm with people, they were just pulling food out of every corner. You know, you were constantly like, oh, you want to try this, you want to try this, you want to try this. And so it was a very, very interactive experience. And we really got to learn a lot about a lot of different kinds of food crops while we were just looking for durian. I love that part. And so what it does is the intercropping actually creates the sense of food culture, because now you're connecting things together, right? Durian, a carrot. If I think about Indonesia, I think of durian and cardamom and coffee and chilies and like all of these things that are come together. And that's partly how you form a food culture. And when people cook for you, they're going to cook from the things on their farm. That together with the environment. So when you have beautiful things around you, you also connect that with a sense of place, right? So we have durians, really delicious durians connected with a really beautiful environment and really impressive waterfalls, really impressive views. If anyone can spot me and Richard in this picture, you get extra credit. And then there's also a sense of history, because of course Indonesia was once a Hindu empire. Scattered around the island, there's still all these old remains of the ancient empire buildings and pyramids and stuff. And some people actually claim that this is the oldest carving of durian. To me it looks like a breadfruit, but people are saying it's a durian. So, 8th century. So all of these things together, it sense this really intense sense of place, of history, and they still have their old trees. And they can tell you who planted these, right? They can tell you how many generations back this was planted, and it's been in the backyard ever since. It really creates sort of a grounding or a sense of time. You can really feel how long people have been living in one area. And to think about how many, your great-great-great-great-grandpa ate the same fruit that you're trying now, really connects you back in time. So it's a very amazing experience. And in Indonesia, they value their old trees. You ask people, are you going to cut it down? They say, no. Why would I cut it down? This is from my 6 generations ago, And this is also a thing that people will go to see. So it's something they can actually sometimes charge an entry fee for. You can book the durians. For this one, you have to get on a waiting list to try the durian. This one, I think, is over 300 years old. So a very, very beautiful tree. So the thing about the old trees and having these really tall trees is that they had to come up with a way of actually harvesting the durians in a way that they wouldn't just smash on the ground. Right? If you have really tall trees, you have uneven cropland, you have a bunch of crops below you. It's going to be kind of difficult to harvest it. You can't put out nets like the Malaysians. It's not as easy to climb and cut. So the way that they handle it is in this video that we'll show you in just a second. All right, so you can see that this is a very, very tall tree. I would guess this tree is at least 100 feet tall. And this guy is just free climbing. Very impressive. There's no ropes holding him in there. If he falls, he's falling. But the way that they handle this is they actually climb up and they tie the durians onto the tree. So if that durian falls, it's going to hang. It's not going to fall and smash. And they climb up every day, usually twice a day, and they harvest the durians. And he's actually going to lower them down to the guy below him. So this is sort of a work, you have to have people who are good climbers. And I do think that climbing trees like this is a skill that is being lost in some countries. It's very, very impressive. Is there anyone in the audience who can climb a tree like this? Really? All right, we'll go back to the regular slideshow here. Yeah, so that's normal and it happens every day in Indonesia. That's how they handle harvesting their durians. And so if you go there as a visitor, this is something you get to witness. And it's just really incredible. Every tour group I've brought to watch a durian harvest, just afterward, it's all they can talk about. It's like, how did that guy get up there? He's so strong and so skilled, you know? The way he just balanced on the branch like it was a tightrope, you know? Just amazing, really amazing. So if you want to watch the whole video, it is on my YouTube channel. And remember this $300 durian that I bought in Thailand? Do you know why it was so expensive? Is it because it tasted better than any other durian I've ever had before? No. I was paying for history. I was paying for the culture of Thailand that is invested in this particular fruit. Because I bought this fruit in Nonthaburi. And Nonthaburi is the traditional home of durian in Thailand. It's where the majority of the varieties originated. And we're talking around the late 1700s, early 1800s, is when you kind of have this renaissance of durian around the Bangkok area. And this has been preserved up until today. You can see the traditional farming method here. It's a canal. So remember, back in the day, everything was by boat, everything. So those canals actually connected to the river, and they would use it for harvesting. So they would just go along in their boat, they would put all the durians in the boat, and then they would take it to the market. Easy. They didn't have to carry durians anywhere. Everything was by boat. They even sold the durians by boat. And today you can still visit farms that are following this practice. They're promoted by the government for preserving the traditional culture of harvesting. So this is Mrs. Maliwan. She is a fourth generation durian farmer in Nonthaburi. And today she'd be considered probably a millionaire because Nonthaburi is very close to Bangkok, so the land prices there have gone up very, very much. So if you're somebody who's inherited land from the 1800s, you did good. But the bad part is that because the land is so expensive, people are starting to sell their farms, right? They're letting urbanization take over. So these farms are becoming less and less. The demand is growing, but availability is decreasing, so the prices are going up. So she creates a very small quantity of crop, but she babies them to death. These durians are spoiled, but not rotten. So she actually covers them to protect them from squirrels. She doesn't want anybody to bite her durians. And she still creates the traditional ferments. This is a very old recipe. People have been doing this in Thailand for I don't know how many hundreds of years, but it's a ferment that's made out of fish, mangosteen peels, some molasses, and different kinds of herbs. And most people have their own recipe that's been handed down through the generations. So we can see that the durian culture in Thailand is extremely old. This is from 1899. It's one of the earliest photographs of durian that I found. And we're going to talk a little bit about history. So if you look at this picture, you can actually see that these are not kampong durians. These are too big. Right? This is a variety of durian. And we know the earliest record we have of durian varieties that I found is from 1863. So this is a description of an Austrian ethnobotanist. He's traveling around Thailand, and he finds out that people are marcotting their durians. So they're actually reproducing durians by marcot in 1863. We also know that there's this poet who wrote a list of 68 varieties of durian in Thailand in around 1873. So he was the royal scribe, he was also the teacher of the royal students, so all of the many children. I think there were over 80 royal children at this time. He was their teacher, and he created these poems to help them learn all the different names of the plants in Thailand, and it included 68 durian varieties, most of which are still in existence today. So if you go to Thailand, you can actually follow this list, which is pretty fun. One of them is the Ganyao Watsak. So this is a ganyao. You've probably all heard of ganyao. However, there are 9 types of ganyao. So this is one of them, and it's actually my personal favorite of the ganyaos. It was named for Watsak, which is one of the temples. So this is one of the early temples from the Ayutthaya period in the 1700s. You have to remember that in Thailand, life revolved around the temples, everything. And they even had a very old tradition of bringing the durians to the temple once a year to do sort of a celebration where they would actually offer the durians to the monks. And this is how we get a lot of durian varieties. A lot of varieties were named either after the temple or for the monk or for some reason during this. And so this is kind of an early version of a durian competition. Right? It was whose durian was the most favored by the monks. And the durians themselves were literal offerings. So this is the Pankrasi. This durian is also mentioned in the poem from 1873. And it literally means that bowl. So a pankrasi is that golden bowl that's below the durian, and that would be a dish that you use to offer to the king or to a royalty or something like that. So it's a holy bowl. And so the durian itself was an offering. Some durians were named after places. So we know from some of the early writings that Kunnan was one of the earliest places that was famous for durians. So their durians were more expensive and also considered a better quality. And this one still exists today. It's called the Bang Kunnan. And Bang is one of the canals. So we know that this was a durian that was grown on the canals. Some durians are named after mythological creatures, like this one. This is the Hemaraj. It is named after a half swan, half lion. So we also get stories in there and mythological creatures. Some durians are full of old terminology that almost isn't used anymore. So this is called ulip. And in Thailand, they used to use the word e as sort of a way of saying like miss or misses. But nowadays, it's considered extremely rude. You should not call people e. It's kind of a funny joke these days. They're like, don't say that, but then everyone still has these durians that have the name ulip or edang or something like that. But you can see how the language has evolved since these durians were named. And there's also a lot of durians that contain jokes. So this is an old joke that actually has a story attached to it. And I forget which one of the royal nobility it involves. It was one of the princes and princesses. And so this was one of the lesser royalty wives. And the name of this durian is actually 5 durians, husband received none. So the joke is that a woman went out and she ordered 5 durians, and it was supposed to be for her royal husband, but in the end, he never got to eat one because they were too good. So that is a joke from one of the nobility. And then everyone loves the name of this one, right? This is the white-fleshed ladyboy. Do you know why it's called a ladyboy? Because we have red ladyboy and we have white ladyboy. And the reason for that is because it has a small c. That's the joke. So you can really get a sense of humor from the past, right? This is another durian from the 1873 list. They were already making jokes about ladyboys back then. So this is something, we talk about the evolution of durian. I wanted to throw this in here because we're in the Philippines. So this is PJ Wester. He's actually a Swedish man who worked in the Philippines, and he worked on shield budding of durians. So he was the one who's considered the father of budding. And this is important because starting in the 1900s, there's sort of a revolution going on within the durian industry. You see it in Thailand, you see it in all the writings and everything. They start sending these royal kids over to the Philippines for their education. So in the early 1900s, you have a lot of people going to the agricultural school at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So it's a very early connection between Thailand and the Philippines. So we have this guy. He comes to the Philippines. He graduates in 1921. He goes back to the Philippines and he starts an agricultural journal called the Casaborn. And he starts teaching people how to do bud grafting. And this is important to know because before this, we know that they're primarily using marcotte. Right? Everyone knows what marcotting is, right? Air layering is the same. But they switch over to bud grafting. And it takes a while, but the result of this is that people actually start top working their trees. So they take old trees and they start adding new varieties on top. So by the time you get into the 1960s, 1970s, there's almost no seedling durians anymore. Everything has been allowed to be top grafted. So there's very, very few old durian trees. There's very few seedling durian trees, and there's very few old durian trees left in Thailand. They've all been converted into durian varieties because they had this early access to grafting technology. The difference is in the south. So where I'm talking about is primarily around Bangkok and the northern part of Thailand, the central part. The south is a totally different story, which I would have to have a whole new presentation to talk about. We also know from this 1910, 1920s period that people had very specific ways of eating durian. So this is another member of the royal family, and she wrote one of the first recipe books. And she talks about the practice of cutting durians in Thailand. Right? So back then, they believed that there was different durians for different classes of people, a very hierarchical society, and also well-bred people didn't eat squishy durian. You should eat slightly firm, slightly fragrant, sweet, but definitely not stinky durian. So you kind of start to create this division in the value of what type of durians are socially acceptable in Thailand. And this goes back more than 100 years. So we know that the practice in Thailand of mature harvest is very old and very deeply ingrained both in their agricultural practice but also in their culture. This would be one of the early ways of harvesting durian. They could do it by themselves, one person, and they have a stick here. He's got a knife at the end of the stick. He's looped the basket over the branch. He's going to kind of nick the durian off into the basket and then lower it down. So this is one of the older ways of doing durian. Nowadays, of course, everyone's familiar with the burlap sack method, right? This is what you see on YouTube. This is primarily what is used throughout Chantaburi and most of Thailand. I've done this is really fun. And we always like to play with the tour groups. We'll actually have them pass a durian back and forth just to practice. But this really relies on the practice of keeping the durian trees short, which I think would have kind of originated in the fact that they started with mark-cutted trees, which are usually a little bit shorter. And then as they changed into different types of grafting, they actually created different pruning methods. So if you want to be able to mature harvest your trees, it should be a shorter tree. It's just easier to manage. So when you go to a Thailand orchard, they all primarily look like this, just really small trees. And it also means that their durians are not ripe when they're picked. So you don't have the same practice of dining on durians in the orchard, right? It's not like in Indonesia where they bring the durians down from the tree and there's all this excitement, you just eat it right then and there, right? You have to wait. The durians are not ready yet. And you can see that these durians are mature harvested because you can see the bump of the incision point, and you can see that the durian has been picked. It's pretty obvious. So applying ripening agent is also a very old practice. This would be a chemical agent that is now used today. It's called etapon. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's very easy to find. You can see this at any agricultural shop. Most of the markets where they sell durian will have at least one stall that's just selling ripening agents. But in the old days, they would have used something like whiskey, some kind of alcohol. You can even use Red Bull to ripen durians. I have friends who are into organics who use Red Bull. I'm not sure if that's organic or not. And the yellow is just turmeric, right? They use the turmeric to mark which durians have already been painted with ripening agent so they don't make a mistake and do it again. So because they mature harvest their durians, even the practice of opening and preparing a durian is different from some place like Indonesia or Malaysia. So for example, you have to use a longer knife because the core of the durian is going to stay hard, right? You shouldn't try to open it like a Malaysian durian, you're just gonna hurt yourself. So use a very long knife and you cut all the way through the durian, and then you cut it into 5 sections, and then you slice it kind of along the section. So when you pack it, it looks like this. And this would be how they pack durians to take it home so that the durians don't spoil and they're all ready to go. And then you can harvest it like this, or you can serve it like this. So this is the Karaket variety. It's believed to be one of the first original 3 durians varieties in the world. You can still eat it today. So because they're mature harvesting again, it changes the texture expectations for durian. Like the lady Pleon said, that they expect their durians to be slightly firm. It shouldn't be soft. It shouldn't be messy. They don't like messy durian. And this is really a problem for friends of mine who are starting to do e-commerce now. You're shipping durian around Thailand. You can't really say how long it will take to arrive. And if the durian overripes, there's a high chance that your customer will be like, oh, it's too squishy. Right? It's not like it's spoiled, but the texture's wrong. So people in Thailand are very obsessed with durian texture, and it has to be the right texture. And as far as I can tell, the correct texture is that the skin is slightly firm and the inside is like butter. So it should have the same texture like an eclair or like an ice cream sandwich or something that has a bite to it, but then is very smooth throughout the middle. And this is considered the perfect durian. But to get a durian picked and then mature it to the right texture, it takes a lot of experience. So we really honor people who can get it right. So when durians ripen, they create a totally different taste profile, right? So we know that when durians are ripening, they're going through a metabolic process, which is the conversion of starches to sugars. That I think everybody is aware of that. So here are other things that happen when a durian ripens. So durians contain a lot of pectins. It's like a glue that holds the fibers together. And as durian ripens, the pectins actually break down and the fibers become more evident. So this is why durian that is more ripe or overripe can sometimes feel stringy or look kind of stringy when you pull it out of the durian. The starches will turn into sugar, and it will get sweeter. But here's the thing, you don't know there's a bunch of different types of sugar, and each type of sugar has its own taste. We can actually taste the differences between sucrose, glucose, maltose, all these different kinds of sugars. So it's really important how the durian is breaking down as well will affect the flavor. A lot of the ethyl, so ethyl is one of the smells that come out of durian. These are present in the early stages of ripening, and as the pectins break down, as the pH is dropping, you actually get a lot more of the off smells, the sulfur smells, all of those things, and those are coming out of the proteins, right? Because durian contains two unusual proteins, and they're both sulfur-containing proteins. And these only come out when the pH drops enough that the bonds can break, and then those smells are released. So that's another reason why Thai people like less smelly durian. They actually like more of the ethyl smells, and they don't like the sulfur smells as much. They're always present, you just can't always smell them. And the color deepens and becomes more vibrant. So you'll also notice in a lot of Thai durians, the color is kind of pale. And this will change as the pH changes within the durian. So it's really important to understand, if you're somebody who's working with mature durians or even ripe durians, that you have a lot of control over the ripening process, and you also can control the flavor. And this is part of the culture of eating durian, because different parts of the world have different expectations of how a durian should taste and different preferences. So I'm going to look here at tree cut montong versus cut montong, because they do eat both in Thailand. And again, we have a difference between North Thailand and South Thailand. So South Thailand usually prefers the tree ripe, and the central region around Chantaburi and Bangkok usually prefers the cut, because they have that longer culture of eating cut durians. So you can see that the montong durian is extremely soft and kind of fluffy looking. If you were to pick that up, it would turn into soup. It's extremely soft. But it also has a lot more of the onion smell. It has a lot more of the sulfur smells compared with the cut one, which is just going to be sweet and fruity. Sweet, fruity, and a little bit nutty. This is also a tree cut versus a pongmani. So you can see the two different sides. The darker orange one is the tree dropped, and the lighter colored one is the mature harvest. These will never taste the same. They will never taste the same, right? And it just depends where in the world you are, which one you're going to like more. And as I mentioned several times, southern Thailand has a lot more similarities with Malaysia compared with northern Thailand. But again, southern Thailand has its own durian culture, so I can't compare them exactly to either one, but it is much easier to find tree ripe durian in southern Thailand. So even within Thailand, there's a lot of different kinds of durians, and there's a lot of different ripenesses available. So there's a huge amount of diversity, and this is what makes it really fun to take people on durian tour to Thailand. The practice of mature harvest also affects cuisine. How are you going to eat the durian? Because you have different problems, right? So in places like Indonesia, you primarily have overripe durian. You have durian that stayed on the tree too long, you have durian that you dropped on accident, it gets squishy. But in Thailand, you have the problem of durians that you picked too early, right? So over here, they're going to have different recipes to utilize those durians that were picked too young. So for example, you can make a curry. So over here, they would be using durian instead of potatoes. Durian makes a really creamy, sweet, buttery type of potato. You can use it in all kinds of different dishes. They would make somtam with durian. In this case, the young durian is cut into slivers. It's pounded with different limes and vinegar and sugar and shrimp pastes. And because it's young and it's a starch, it just sucks up all those flavors, and it makes a really delicious type of salad. They also would use roasted durian. So I've actually seen people chop it up and roast it, just like you would do normal vegetables, and then eat it with a glass of milk salad. So these are a few ways that Thai people are utilizing their underripe durians in Thailand. It changes the way people eat because in Indonesia, I was eating durian outdoors at a durian restaurant, usually in the afternoon or at night. In Thailand, people don't eat durian on the street, they take it home to ripen. Right? Durian is not ready yet when it's sold in the market. And it also means as a tourist, you can go to big markets in Thailand and find nothing to eat. No durian ready to eat. So that can be something that's actually frustrating for tourists who come and they only have a couple of days. They really want to eat durian, but they can't find anything that's ready to eat. So this is something just to be aware of if you travel in Thailand. It also means that the export industry is fairly old in Thailand. I haven't been able to figure out exactly how old it is, but it's very well developed. Everyone knows that Thailand exports the most durian of anywhere in the world. But we know that by 1905, Thailand had a very well-developed pomelo exporting industry. They were sending a lot of pomelo to Hong Kong, and they even sent pomelo all the way to Denmark. Found this a very fun fact. So I think there's probably no reason why they weren't sending durian along with the pomelo. However, we know that the durian industry only really took off around 2014. So it took over 100 years to develop the durian industry in Thailand. The graph here, only around 2011, they started exporting to China. So for those of you guys just getting into the durian industry, don't feel bad. It took Thailand a really long time to start ramping up their industry to the levels that it is today. And today, Montong comprises about 90% of the durians in Thailand. So it's most of the time when you go to a market, this is the variety that you're going to find. This is a 4-ton truck of durian. You see these driving around all the time in Thailand. I always try to kind of keep distance from them with my car. I always get nervous they're gonna like break or something. I actually saw one of these once, broken in half, durians across the road. So that stayed in my mind and now I keep distance. It also means that the type of farm has changed. So in the past, durian farms would be, again, same like Indonesia, a place where people lived. It was a home. They planted durians in their backyard, they planted durians in maybe a plot of land next to their house. They ate off their own land, right? They planted so that they could feed their family and take things to the market. But now that there's an export industry, that has changed, and now you have these big, beautiful farms, right? Very lovely plantations. However, it's not a home. So the way that people connect with their farms has changed. And a lot of people nowadays rely on workers, they rely on managers, and even though they own the farm, they may not have a connection with the farm themselves. So one of the things that has happened in recent years, this is Princess Sirenhorn. She's actually asking the farmers to replant the old varieties so that they won't be lost. So the old varieties, that original 68 durian varieties from 1873, has now considered part of national culture, and she's asking people to help preserve them by planting them on their farm. So the majority of farmers now, just to be supporting their country and supporting their culture, are planting at least a few of the old varieties on their farms, even if they have an export farm, just to support their country. So you get these farmers like Uncle Toy, who is very proud because his farm has been identified by Princess Sirenhorn as a cultural preservation farm. So he is focusing on preserving the old varieties, he's focusing on tourism, and he also sells on Facebook and does the e-commerce, and he gets very high prices actually. So for me, as a durian tour leader, bringing my groups to his farm or to other people focusing on the old varieties can be very spending. This is another farm we like to bring people to. This is Suwon Leong Pho. This was founded in the 1950s, and they have 50 or so varieties of old durians. And again, very expensive. So to compare the prices for the old varieties now compared with like Montong, I would say the average price for Montong is around 150 baht per kilogram. The old varieties minimum is around 300 baht per kilogram and can go up to 800 baht. So the price difference has really changed, and especially as it's becoming more popular, the younger generations are getting more interested in kind of reviving the past. You have a lot more hipster stuff like craft culture. You get a lot more interest in the old varieties, and the prices are just going up. I've also noticed with my tour groups that when there are more durian varieties available, they eat more. You guys have probably experienced it yourself. You're very full, you think you don't want to eat anymore. But if someone brings out a new variety you never tried before, you suddenly have room for 3 pieces. Has anyone experienced that before? Yeah, me too. So with my groups, the more durian varieties there are, the more that they eat and the higher my bill. And I think this is the secret to why Malaysians eat more durian than anyone else. So if you guys remember from Emmanuel's presentation the other day, he mentioned that Malaysians have the highest per capita consumption of durian in the world, right? I think it's because they also have the highest diversity of durian in the world. Everyone knows about Musang King, right? This is their primary commercial durian. It's an excellent durian, very, very good. But you can see the small seed there, everyone super loves that. The diversity of durian in Malaysia is unprecedented. It's a huge country. It comprises both peninsular Malaysia and also East Malaysia, Borneo. You have durians like the Otak Unanggala. This is a hybrid of orange and red durian varieties. You get things like Durian dulcis, right? This is another species of durian that is edible. And this would be one of the Dayak tribes from the East Borneo. Durian kura-kura. This is a weird one. It tastes like jackfruit. It's crunchy and sweet and juicy. Very weird durian. And Durian sangka. This is from peninsular Malaysia. It's a type of Durian lobianus. So huge diversity of durian species. And a hugely diverse population. So if we're bringing groups to Malaysia, very, very fun, because we get to travel through a lot of different regions, a lot of different cultures, and a lot of different durians. Another thing about Malaysia is that they still have this deeply rooted culture of boutique family farms. So these are people, again, who are still living on their farm. So this is a family that we know in Penang, Malaysia. And they open their farm every year to having guests come in to eat durian. You have generations-old farms. So you have a very deep sense of culture, a deep sense of time, and he can tell you stories about his grandpa or his great-grandpa or whoever was eating the durian in that area. And you have, even within the one species, so many varieties of durian. I think Malaysia has like 200 varieties of durian, and they are very diverse and very delicious. Tell me you can look at this picture and you don't want to eat it. Anybody tell me they don't want to eat this? I think no. This is D28. This is a D2. This is one of the earliest varieties of durian that was registered in Malaysia. I think it was 1932. This is the D145, the Surrey Hijau. This is a funny one because even though it was registered quite a long time ago, it hasn't really been discovered yet. It's from Kuantan on the East Coast, and it's very similar to Musang King, but actually has a richer flavor. So I really love this variant, and if you get a chance, you should go and look for this one. This is D24, got a kind of a more pale durian here. This used to be the commercial variety, but it's kind of being superseded by Musang King. You still find it around. Best durian with coffee. Highly recommended. This is Tekka, another one of my personal favorites, but it's very difficult to open because of the line down the middle. So only very experienced durian people know how to handle this one. You can always tell if someone is new or very experienced on how they open a Tekka. So to conclude, there's a lot of bird diversity in Malaysia, just within the named established varieties, not even talking about the species. And people in Malaysia, because of this, are willing to pay for people to have skills. So in Malaysia, you have a whole culture of durian gurus, or people who are experts in durian. I think everyone has an expert in durian in their family that they go to for help, who can identify durians, who can smell the best one. It's a thing, like it's really a thing. And primarily, these are teachable skills. So there's things that I was able to learn, and I'm now able to pass on to guests. And we do durian schools, where we teach people the Malaysian style of identifying, tasting, and learning about durian. So very, very fun thing to do when you're in Malaysia. The most important one is learning how to identify durian by appearance. I think Malaysians are the best at this. Because they have so many varieties and they get exposed so early on. And this is very important because durian is also extremely expensive in Malaysia, far more expensive than other fruits. So one of the ways would be by the types of thorns. This is important to know that there are at least 6 different shapes of thorns. I would think that shani would be probably the point of convex for the most part. The cheni kai, which is what puyat is based on, would probably be maybe the other. It has a little bit of a different shape. So this is a fun way to start learning about durians. The bottoms, you can look at the bottoms and find out what type of durian you have as well, based on what the bottom looks like. This is a variety from Penang called a Warlord. This is important because a lot of people will try to serve it as Musang King, but it's not Musang King. It's a totally different variety. And you can recognize it based on its shape. It has a long stem. It has a kind of a longer shape. It has a little bit of a curve in the middle, which is why they call it labu or hourglass. It's a type of pumpkin in Malaysia that has an hourglass shape. So that's how you recognize a Warlord. Greenskin is a relative of a cheni. It's considered a seedling of cheni. It was brought to Penang maybe in the late 1800s as part of the tin mining trade. Here's how you identify the greenskin. It has huge thorns, has a very short stem, very short fat stem with a flared tip. So that area around the incision point is always really fat. And that's how you would recognize the greenskin. Red prawn, another very expensive and durian specific to Penang. Very beautiful durian, very delicate. Really love this durian. It has a lot of wine taste. This one is shaped like a football, right? It looks like an American football. It has very small thorns, and it has kind of the crown area around the stem is also full of very, very small thorns. And of course, blackthorn. Everyone needs to learn how to recognize the blackthorn so you don't get cheated. Because in places like Penang, we saw a lot of other durians being sold as blackthorn, and so then you may or may not be getting the correct thing. So I was actually in Singapore once, and somebody was trying to sell me a blackthorn, but it was actually a D13. And to give you a price difference, I think a D13 is maybe 5 times less expensive than a blackthorn at that time. So very important skills here. Blackthorn, you know it's a blackthorn, it always has that orange mark in the middle, same like a tekka. It's shaped like a little pumpkin, very round durian, and it has a belly button on the bottom. It may or may not have the blackthorn. The blackthorn is a dried up flower stem. It's very easy to break off, so sometimes it has it, but most of the time it doesn't. But this is a way to identify the blackthorn. And if you guys have any more questions about identifying durians, please feel free to find me later or ask me questions through my email or Instagram. In places like Malaysia, it's also very important to know how to present the durian. So because they have softer durians, they use different tools. Whereas in Thailand, they used a long knife. In Malaysia, they probably would use a shorter knife, or I know that they use in different parts of Malaysia different tools, but in Penang, because of the softness and delicacy of the durian, they use small knives. And I'm gonna have to go faster. All right, so in that area, because they don't climb the trees, they actually let them fall. They put out nets, right? And the nets preserve the durian and extend the shelf life, so they can actually move the durians around and have them last about 12 hours. It also means that in Malaysia they have their own food culture. They do a lot with very ripe durians, right? So as Thailand had a problem with underripe durians, Malaysia has a problem with overripe durians. So they would do things like tempoyak, fermented durian paste, or cooking their durians with coconut milk to make a delicious dessert. So next up I want to talk about Vietnam for a minute. Because Vietnam is up and coming, right? Everyone's talking about Vietnam. They just started planting Musang King. And I had the opportunity recently to go to the Central Highlands of Vietnam. And I was very interested because mostly what I knew is that they have an old culture of coffee. Right? Everyone knows really Vietnam is a coffee grower. And my partner over there is a coffee snob, so he was excited. So as soon as we arrived in Vietnam, he went straight to the coffee school and he got himself an education in Robusta coffee. And so I felt like this was a very important thing because you have a very intense food culture already within Vietnam. And most of the farmers that we ended up meeting were coming from a background of growing coffee. So the majority of durian farms are actually coffee farms originally, with durian added as a secondary crop. And I felt that durian was fairly new. I didn't see any trees over 30 years old. The majority of them were within the last 10 or 15 years. So it's definitely a newer crop for them in this area. I was also surprised that when I asked them, are you going to go more into, monocrop, you're going to plant more montong. And he told me in Vietnamese, translated essentially as hell no. And the reason for that is because they're coming from a background of coffee. And around 10 years ago, there was a crash in the coffee market. It had nothing to do with politics. It was that there was some sort of trade agreement that changed. But these people really struggled. It was really hard for them. It was traumatic. They lost their business. They were fully on coffee, fully monocrop. And the guy told me, never again. And I talked to several people like this, and they all told me, I will never do monocrop again. It was a mistake. And I found that very interesting. So this is his farm. He has baby durians, he has long pepper poles, and he has coffee, all planted together in his farm. And they're very focused on export. I asked them, are you going for domestic market? They said, no, we're going for China. So a lot of montong in this area. And they definitely have a preference for montong and varieties that have a thick, very thick flesh. I didn't see a lot of varieties, mostly montong. This is the only local variety we found. They call it monkey brain. Super, super thick flesh. And the risao, which of course we're familiar with in America now. Did not find very many seedling durians. It was mostly varietal. But even their export farms were interplanted. So this was another export farm that had durian and coffee, as well as other things. And this was another one that's a new farm, a montong farm, and he interplanted with lychees and lemongrass. So what it meant that I thought was very interesting about Vietnam is you have export farms that are also very appropriate for tourism, because you can walk around the farm and find all kinds of interesting plants to feed your tourists while you're walking around. So we were able to try avocados and rambutans and pepper and all kinds of interesting crops while we were exploring the farms. Things that I had never seen before, like hot doi. This is very expensive. They sell this to China. Gac fruit is another thing that we saw in Vietnam that I don't see very much. They cook it with rice. It's delicious. Also very high in vitamin A. It makes the rice really fatty. And they also use their durian to make a durian avocado smoothie. This is very, very yummy. So those durians, all those things that they're growing together on their farm, they actually mix them together into their own food culture. And for my last place I want to talk to you guys about is Zanzibar. Because when we talk about interplanting and intercropping, Zanzibar wins in terms of farms that are the most diverse, the most interesting. Really, really enjoyed visiting farms in Zanzibar. Total surprise for me. Zanzibar was on the spice trade route. So we have ships going from Europe to Zanzibar, from the Arabian Peninsula to Asia for many hundreds of years. They were doing things primarily like cloves. At one time, Zanzibar was the largest producer of cloves in the world. They still have nutmegs. And if you ask them, where is durian from? They will tell you it is from Zanzibar. They call it Durian. And they were absolutely surprised when I told them that they had durian in Malaysia. But really? But Durian is from here. So it's very ingrained into their culture. They grow up with it. They have stories about it. They can tell you funny stories from their childhood, parents eating durian. It's definitely ingrained in their culture. And it makes for sharing durian with them just a really, really fun and rewarding experience. There are no varieties of durian in Zanzibar. This is important to realize. There is no grafting at all in Zanzibar. It is not a part of their culture. They don't even know how. It's all from seedling trees. All of it. And I know you're going to hate this, but this is the most common way to open durian in Zanzibar. So we actually had to ask them nicely to open like this. And oh, please, please, can we just open it nicely? Because otherwise they just smash it in half. Yeah, my Instagram was full of complaints about the durian looking like this. I said, I'm sorry, it's cultural, I can't do anything. But the thing about Zanzibar is it has the biggest, oldest trees I have ever seen. This is a place where durian is fully naturalized. I have no idea how old this tree is, and neither do they. But they're everywhere, these trees. You're walking around the village under the canopy of these super ancient trees. And these trees were planted at some point while Zanzibar was under the colony of the Omani Empire, right? Which gives them an entirely different history and a different set of rules compared to Asia. because they were under something called the Waqf system. This is an Arabic land management system, and they were also part of the slave trade, right? So under the Waqf system, you have a landowner, and then you have people who work the land. And the people who work the land have the right to stay on that land and propagate everything under the trees. So the landowners actually don't own the land, they only own the crops. They own the cloves, they own the coconuts, they own all the crops that have value. I'll finish. And the slaves underneath it are the ones who own the land. So it's a totally different land system. So when we're talking to people about who owns these durian trees, it's very unclear if it was the land owners or it was the people who work the land. Very interesting system. So they're planted in gardens surrounded by many, many crops because these are places that people live and work. Things like baobab. You have bungo fruit, which is similar to like little banana fruits. You make juice out of this. You have infu. This tastes like chocolate brownies. It's delicious. It looks like a little acorn. You have zambarao. I think you guys have that one here. This is called soda soda. It tastes like a berry. These are delicious water mangoes. So you have an extremely vibrant food culture in Zanzibar. And you really get a feeling of place. You get a real sense that you are somewhere different. It's extremely unique. But the problem is that people don't replant these trees. Right? You have these amazing trees, but you don't have anything in the middle. This is our friend Ali. He's part of the Green Village Tourism, and he's trying to get people to start planting durian again. Because people have this idea that you can't make money from durians. So when these 300-year-old trees are gone, they're gone, and so will be the durian culture of Zanzibar. That'll be it. But there are certain things that no matter how much money you pay for, you can't get them again. And 300-year-old trees are one of them. So that brings me to the Philippines. Because people like to argue about who has the origin of durian in Asia. Right? People like to say it's Thailand or it's Malaysia. But I'd like to remind you guys that all of these countries were once part of the same landmass, right, before the last ice age. So all of you guys have the origin of durian. And if you really want to get fussy about it, we'll give the award to India because they have the first fossilized record of durians. There are so many types of durians here in the Philippines already. So you have a very diverse amount of durians. People will be happy to eat a lot. And the durians here have extremely thick meat. So as we saw, there was an early connection with Thailand. Probably a lot of durian varieties have been coming over for at least 100 years, and they're all very, very thick meat. Impressive, right? This is a durian, one of the fleshiest durians I know of. People get really excited when they see this on my Instagram page. But unlike Thailand, the taste here is strong, it's bitter, and the texture is smooth. Totally different eating culture. The outdoor activities here in the Philippines are amazing. You have steep mountains, beautiful views, just a really unique environment. These are the cable cars at Tawan-Tawan. This is one of the ways that they would harvest durians and move them across the mountains. And the landscape here always amazes people. It's very rugged. So you have a very unique sense of place when you come to the Philippines. The cool weather gives you a unique sense of food culture. They have coffees in the mountains. There's a lot of intercropping. We also see cacao every time we take people out to the durian farms. And chocolate and durian together will, for me, always be a hallmark of Philippine durians. This is delicious. I hope everyone gets to try it. So is Coca-Cola and durian. I haven't seen this anywhere else. This is very specific to the Philippines. So uniqueness is useful for branding in terms of export, marketing your durian abroad, but also in terms of tourism. Because you want to attract people here, but you also want to let people know what is special about your durians. Why should they buy your durians over someone else? I think there's an amazing future ahead for durians here in the Philippines, and I hope you all will embrace it. So good luck, everybody. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this talk, please like and subscribe.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, the founder of the Year of the Durian, Miss Lindsay.